Hi, everybody. My name is Elissa Cedarleaf Dahl. I know some of us got to talk last fall when we were doing our meetings together, and I can't believe that we are here now doing the works in progress already. So I'm going to share a little bit about my project in Medellin, Colombia with you today. Who do I represent? I work in Minneapolis Public Schools. My school is a big middle school. We have like 1,100 students, 6th to 8th grade. It's a pretty progressive district. I remember hearing some of your stories about your own districts and thinking, ours is actually pretty progressive. My specialty is visual art and then collaborative mural projects. I do those with my students on a yearly basis. It's kind of like project-based learning, that class. So these are a couple pictures. This is the first time I've used this like loom thing with my video in here. I don't know where to put it. These are some ways that we do murals in our school. We usually do them on fabric, on tables, and then install them somewhere in the school. They're always kid-generated designs and artwork. And we have a lot of community painting events to try to get as many people involved as possible. So you can see here kids working together around a table in groups. They're painting on this fabric that I actually brought to Columbia with me. It's called Polytab. It's a parachute cloth. So it makes painting these murals really flexible. You can bring this cloth anywhere. It's lightweight. It's very strong. And then it can be gelled or glued to almost any surface. And it lasts for a long, long time. So a little bit more about where I come from. In Minneapolis, it's been a hard few years. Everybody's had a hard time too, but I feel like Minneapolis has had kind of a triple whammy. We had a 3-week staff strike last year. These are a couple pictures of it. It happened to just be like the coldest days of the year, of course. Well, on top of a bunch of already cold days. In the last couple of years, 75% of our students have had to move to new schools through a district redesign. And then in 2020, the murder of George Floyd happened about half a mile from our school. So that's been very significant too for our students. Here is the site where he was murdered on 38th in Chicago. It's now called George Floyd Square. And we've led staff meetings here. We've come here with students. Many of our students live right in around this intersection. And you can just see the response to what happened there, to his murder, and an example of how art came from that tragedy. So coming out of COVID and George Floyd, I did see a lot of reactions from people in our community and beyond worldwide. Anger, sadness, destruction. A lot of our city was damaged. And not only just like businesses and roads and places, but people's homes too. A lot of fear of policing, a lot of police quitting. And during all these negatives, there also was a very, very strong art response. And so right away, people started to put up murals and street art. And the street art, in my opinion, really, really changed the direction of the movement or really brought a kind of a moral compass in. So let me show this next slide here. Part of my job when I was a murals teacher back then was to, during COVID, have my students engage in some of these outdoor mural projects after George Floyd's murder. And this is one of my students doing a project on some plywood. So, art appeared on plywood that was being used to protect windows on businesses and homes and doors. And so instead of just having boarded up spaces, they became these art spaces. And the murals would memorialize George Floyd and other victims of police violence. They'd be a protector to keep businesses and homes safer. They were also a way that we beautified our city when things were burning and being destroyed. I saw that there was so much action involved in making art together that people wanted to do something that felt positive. So they would get together and work on these murals. Someone would bring design, someone would donate paint, and people would spend all day working on these together. And because I'd already been teaching murals, I saw that this had even more depth and impact for a classroom engagement piece. Our city was really becoming a murals-rich city, is becoming one. And then during COVID, I also learned about Medellin. I was able to participate in a webinar. And so in this webinar, local Medellin art expert named Pablo Ospina presented to Minneapolis Public Schools teachers and students about the art here in Medellin, specifically Comuna 13. He and I became friends, and he helped me write my Fulbright application. This is him on the right-hand side running this webinar. And so I connected with Pablo Ospina about the art here, and I really saw a lot of similarities with Minneapolis, Medellin's history of violence and unrest and instability, and how art and hip hop culture here were used as a way to turn the tide and to steer kids into more creative outlets versus continuing a cycle of violence. So I really wanted to come here. And some of the things I've learned about Medellin since I did come, it did have the highest murder rate in the world in 1993. And that's when I was like in high school and then college learning about Colombia. I had Colombian professors and they were saying, you can't go, we can't go. And now I know a lot more about that history. During those eras, like for decades, poor neighborhoods around Medellin were controlled by warlords and gangsters. And then the small towns, a lot of the small towns were being also controlled by guerrilla, narcotraficante, people who were basically saying you're either with us or you're dead. And if people weren't in accordance with being, controlled by drug traffickers, or that their small town would be like a route for drug trafficking, they had to leave or be killed. And so a lot of the poor neighborhoods in Medellin are actually places where small town people had to relocate out of necessity to save their own lives. In 2016, the president won the Nobel Peace Prize for drawing up a peace accord with the armed forces of Colombia, or the FARCs. And the history is very complicated, but that marked the end of the longest civil war in the world. And since then, there's been new political stability. There's been a citywide rebirth in Medellin. It's only 7 years old, but it had been kind of developing before that. And there's so much redefinition happening now that Medellin is safer, that it's just like just such a beautiful place. They're being really redefined in the public eye. There's a lot of healing going on and so much pride when you talk to the people around here who survived all this for what their city is now. Tourism here has increased tenfold since the 90s. And just this last January, they inaugurated their first Afro-Caribbean female vice president named Marquez. And then the current president is their very first progressive president who also happened to be a former FARC guerrilla. So his name is Pedro. Interesting history here, very interesting. And my first project I did here with a school in a native reservation was kind of a tourism project. So this is a graph just showing how many tourists did come to Medellin in the 90s, in Colombia actually, and then more recently, and just how much tourism and foreigners coming here is a very new thing for them. So I'll tell you a little bit about logistics of these projects that I do with schools. And this is kind of a model I've developed myself, but this is the approach I'm using here. So first, identifying schools. I've been able to make contacts through people I've met here, through Pablo Ospina and the Comuna 13 community, through my own daughter's school. And right now I'm working with about 4 schools on different mural projects. When you identify a school, you have to find some activities where you community build with their students and staff. So you're not just coming in and doing like a one-off project without having any relationships. So meetings and then games with kids, passing out prizes, being there for social time. Those are some of the things that I've used so far. Then you want to figure out a mural theme, figuring out what the mural should be about, what's the message it should have. And that's a real important point to do with stakeholders in that community. And then find ways that as many students as possible can participate. So in this picture here, we have about 100 kids that help make these big mural signs for my first project. And we had to rotate through them. And then there were other activities they could do that day. And tons of kids were participating. It was a little overwhelming. And then you're producing the mural, you're painting it together, and then it goes somewhere, it's installed, or sometimes you just paint right on the wall, and then some sort of a celebration. So I've done this once so far in Colombia, and I think I'm going to be doing it 2 more times if I can pull that off before I leave June 1st. So this first project I did, I'm so proud of. This is one where I've just met the right people at the right time. It was in a indigenous school outside a small town here called Hardin, and it was a group of people who were Christianized, but then also they practice some of their own traditional beliefs, and so they're kind of a blend. And they're called the Kamata Rua and Berashami people. And what they wanted me to do with their students was help develop signage and murals for an ancestral tour they were going to be starting for outsiders to come in and learn about their community. It's an ethno tour. It's the first of its kind with an indigenous tribe in Colombia, and it was sponsored by a social service agency here called Confenalco. As part of the tour, people in the community are sharing their culture and history and art with outsiders, teaching Indigenous identity to young people too, because the young people are the tour guides. And in this case, we had discussions with students at the school about their symbolism, their designs, their artesania, and tried to make some mural designs following that. So we created this signage for this first ethno tour that they were going to be doing. And the hope is that every Saturday there would be a group of 15 to 20 tourists coming to go through this ancestral route in their sacred lands. So here's a couple of pictures of me with the students at the school. We were reading a book from Minnesota to see the landscape. This is a book written by our namesake of our school, Justice Alan Page. So he donated some things for me to give to the kids. And on the right are some student artists. Here we are doing the designs on the left and then painting the mural on the right. And I do have a video, but I'm already talking 11 minutes, so I'm just going to share it with y'all if you want to hear some of the sights and sounds and see the atmosphere of this event. Here we are painting these signs that we're going to be using for their first ancestral tour. This is a video I'll show you all. I'll just put a link in my works in progress page. See if I can go through it. This is just some of the students at the end of the day who would help paint the mural with me. Out in their like sport court outside their school. It was such a beautiful, beautiful, very green space where we did that. And then the next day at 5 a.m, I went and installed these signs. On the right, there were 10 of those signs that said Paradas. That's the different stops on the ancestral routes with designs created by the kids. And on the left is the main entrance sign that the students designed and painted with me to mark where the ancestral tour would start. So my next project's coming up. I'm working on a mural now with my students' school, my daughter's school. It's called CCB. And the mural is going to be called, or the theme is Hate Has No Home Here. So I'll be working with, it's actually a kindergarten through 11th grade. And we'll have 2 opportunities for all students to either do some drawings or color in our mural design. I'm also going to be participating in a intercambio, like an exchange mural project with a public school in Comuna 13 and a French private school here. I'm really interested to see how they do that kind of exchange between 2 very different schools. And finally, I'm going to be working with the woman on my left here, Paula. She runs a restaurant in Comuna 13 where she gives free meals to kids when they're done with school. And I'm hoping to work on a mural with some of the kids as they drop in to be hanging in her restaurant since it's such a special community space. Finally, I did see one of you or a couple of you have done kind of like general what we've learned so far, and I just loved hearing what you said. So I just have a couple things and then I'll wrap this up. So on the far left here is my family and my daughters joined these silks classes, and the silks classes are like hanging from the ceiling and they do like acrobatics. And we were just having to walk home from this silks class with these bright hot pink silks around our necks, and we're these light-skinned blonde foreigners, and I just realized like we will never fit in. We shouldn't even try, and that's kind of the point. Being the minority, being the odd one out, it's really good for us. So that's kind of a funny picture, but it's very apropos. I've loved the unstructured time as a teacher here, and I met the man who's right here in this picture down here, right there. Look at how I'm using this circle thing. And he was just a community organizer in this neighborhood. I just walked upon his coffee shop. I spent the whole afternoon with him touring around and meeting people. It was so cool. So window conversations, just let yourself have that time to talk to people and learn about who they are and just absorb everything that feels different and try not to rush through it, right? We're so used to, as teachers, like, oh, we got to go to class, I got to cut this off. And it's just been so valuable not to have to do that. I've built up a lot of empathy for newcomer families, thinking about what it's like to try to join a school system here and just so much I don't understand. My daughter here, she has her little like her little notebook where it's like section, don't know, instructor, don't know. Like we're all just trying our best here. And it is really, really hard, even as someone who has taught, who speaks Spanish and has a pretty good like understanding of school systems, it's still really complicated. So I've built up so much empathy. And then finally, we really miss our dog. And luckily there are dogs everywhere in Medellin. So we did get rabies shots. We didn't think we'd need them, but it does give us a little peace of mind when our daughters are petting and loving on every single dog they see here, and giving them the space to do that. So that's my presentation. I did post a few follow-up questions on the page to share with you. I know I'm really specific with muralism and public art and collaborative projects, but if you have anything that you'd like to share about project-based learning that you've done, I have got 3 questions here. When have you created community through art? What was hard about it or powerful about it? Or what do you see it doing for relationships with students? Also, just thinking about George Floyd and the violence here in Medellin and all the history and all the conversations in our communities. How can murals help us have those types of courageous conversations? Sustainability, what kind of collaborative art initiatives and projects create lasting change? Like, what are some things that you've done or seen that seem to really change a community? I'd love to hear about it. What messages would you want to convey related to your lens or teaching subject using public art or muralism? Like, if you could make a climate change mural, what would it say? Or if you could make a mural about a textbook that you read, what would it say? What would it look like? I'd love to know kind of some interdisciplinary ideas. So that's it, everybody. Thanks. And please, comment or feel free to ask me questions or whatever. I know this was long and I apologize, but thanks to everybody for doing this big adventure. And I hope that we can connect again soon in the future. Thanks.